Hey everybody, this is chapter 5 of I Am David. David thought living in the house was very difficult. It was not the house itself, that was lovely to be in, but the people. What was difficult about them was that they constantly seemed to expect him to say and do things he would never have thought of, and what appeared sensible and natural to him seemed to surprise them. Otherwise, being in a house was lovely, quite wonderful. David contemplated the two words with satisfaction, repeating them several times to himself. He had been in the house many days now and was learning all the time. He had learned, for example, to use those two words. They meant something that was good. Quite wonderful. It was satisfying to know several words for the same thing, for then he could describe exactly to what degree a thing was good. It was just the same with the word beautiful. You could divide it into three. If something were only a little beautiful, it was nice. If it were more beautiful, you said pretty. And then finally, beautiful. Being able to use words properly was a great advantage, for the more words you knew the meaning of, the better you could think. And besides, it was important when you were talking to people. They were not so surprised at what you said if you used the right words. The children's mother had laughed when he saw the bathroom and said it was beautiful and good. He should have said lovely, of course. He would always remember the bathroom with its gleaming pale green tub and all that clear, clean water that came when you just turned a faucet. You could have as much hot water as you liked and sit in it right up to your neck. And there was soap, large pieces of it that smelled much better than the cake he had bought himself. It rubbed into a beautiful soft laver that made you quite clean. And when you had finished, there were large soft clean towels to dry yourself on. And there were little sticks to clean your nails with, and you could brush your teeth. David had never tried that before, and the first time he made his mouth sore doing it, but it was wonderful to be so clean. There were books in the house, too, not just one, but many. When he had first arrived, the children's father had asked him if there was anything he particularly wanted. David had considered carefully and then said, I think most of all I'd like a book to read. He wanted to hear music again, too, but the book was more important. He said it must be a book published before 1917. The children's father had smiled and asked why, but David had dared not tell him it was because he wanted to be sure that what was in it was true and not something they made up. The meals he had had in that house delighted him, both because there was so much to eat and it all tasted so good, and even more because the table looked so beautiful, with the glasses and the silver and the white cloth, and with a fine plate for everybody. But people he found difficult. They seemed to have no idea of what was good. The children's mother was quite pleased that he liked the bathroom, but the children themselves hated it. At least the boys did. Perhaps he was wrong, but no matter how he tried, he could not help liking it himself. He had nothing against being dirty. You got dirty in the course of the day, and you could just not avoid it. But to be free to wash the dirt off whenever you wanted to, yes, that was wonderful. And yet the children did not seem to understand that, and he dared not tell them how disgusting it was when men who had been clean with clean shiny hair and clean teeth grew so matted and ingrained with dirt that everything about them smelled repulsive and looked loathsome. But if he told them that, then of course they might discover where he came from, and then they would be obliged to send for them. The children could not understand either why he was so anxious to read books. They always wanted him to go out with them, and so he had to go, though he longed to be left alone to sit and read his books. There was no end to what you could learn from books, if only you had time enough, and it took a lot of time. He could read more rapidly now, but not really quickly for all that, and he had to first choose his books. If only he could read all of them. But David knew he did not have very much time. He must go on before winter came, and so it was important for him to read books where he would find information that would be useful to him. It was, in fact, the books that led him to stay. The people, the children especially, made him nervous, and he hated being in the same place with Carlo. The house he could leave, though not without regret. But it was important to go on reading as long as possible so that he could find out things he wanted to know, and that was why he had now been there many days. He had learned that he could never become an ordinary boy. The knowledge was painful, but there was no point in deceiving himself. He would like to have learned to be an ordinary boy, to be as a boy should be outside the concentration camp. And yet the children were so stupid that David did not understand them at all. He did not understand why they did not like bathing. He did not understand why they preferred to live without knowing anything. They did not seem to think it was necessary, as if there was no difference between a donkey and a human being. David was very fond of donkeys. They were, he sought for the right word, nice. Anything you liked, it was not really beautiful, you called nice. But it was very much better to be a human being able to learn things and know things. He did not understand either why they did not regard mealtimes as gracious occasions. They would often spill things on the white cloth and sit so restlessly and be so clumsy and awkward with their knives and forks that they soon brought disorder to the beautifully arranged table where they had been sitting. But the most dangerous things about them was that you could not follow what they were thinking about. They always wanted to be playing, and David had particularly wanted to learn how to play. And he could play a little now. He knew how to play ball. A ball was round and satisfying to hold, and it had colors, good, bright colors. He liked throwing it to Andrea and catching it again. Racing with Andrea was good too, and climbing trees and jumping over a rope higher and higher. He liked the sort of games that made him aware how well his body would obey him, and the sort where you had to make something, turning a few bits of woods into things you could use, all that kind of thing. But the children often wanted to play at being other people. They would pretend one was the grocer and the other would come and buy from him, or they would be a mother and a father and some other children, or they might be pirates. That sort of thing David did not care for, and when they said he could choose first what he wanted to be, he would always answer that he would be David, who had come to watch them. Once they had wanted to play a game where some of them had to be soldiers and take the others prisoners. "And I'll be captain over the soldiers," shouted Carlo, hastily adding, "That is if you don't want to be, David." David had looked straight at him. "I will not play anything wicked and horrible," he had replied. Maria immediately said that if David would not play, she would not either, but Andrea said with some irritation, "You're a strange person, David. What's wicked about that?" David had waited until he was sure his voice would not tremble. "I'm not very good at playing, but I can see when you play, you try to imitate what's real, and I won't have anything to do with pretending to take people prisoner. It's horrible and wicked, and no one has any right to take another people prisoner. Everybody has a right to his life and freedom, and anybody who takes them away has lost his own right to be a human being." "Yes, but David," Andrea's voice was no longer irritated, only interested. "What if there's a murderer? Shouldn't he be put in prison either? Or a thief or something like that? There's got to be someone to decide who has to go to prison." David frowned. "I don't know. Yes, a murderer, he should go to prison to stop him murdering more people, but you mustn't lay hands on him or starve him. No, I'm not quite sure about it. I haven't found all about it yet, but no person has any right over other people. A man must be his own master." "Yes, but mother and father have a right over us," Andrea said. "No, it's not a right. At least, I don't think so. It's more of a duty. I mean, since they're your parents, they must give you food and clothes and teach you all the things you can't know by yourself so that you can manage for yourself when you're a grown-up. What they do is something good. It's not that sort of thing I mean by right over people. Having right over others is something horrible and shameful, using force to make them do what you want." At that point, the two little boys began yawning. "Aren't we going to play anything?" they asked impatiently. "David can decide what we're going to play then." David had felt relieved. He had to answer Andrea, of course, and try to explain things to him, but Andrea still did not seem to understand what he was driving at, and David was always afraid that if he talked too much, he might be led into saying something he should not. And anyway, he did not care to talk when Carlo was there. The first couple of days, Carlo had tried to wheedle himself into David's good books, but David was only too familiar with that kind of approach, and so Carlo had stopped. David spoke to him politely whenever it was necessary, just as he has always done to them, but Carlo had by now realized that he could not expect any more of him. Nevertheless, it was unpleasant. Carlo was so good at deception that you could hardly credit he was only a boy. He had made a great effort to convince David that he was not bad, and when he had realized that David was not going to let himself be impressed, he pretended to be hurt by it. David thought what a good thing it was he had seen so much deception in the camp, or he would certainly have been taken in, just as Andrea and the two little boys and Maria were. They did not know Carlo was bad, and that was why David felt uncomfortable in his presence. The two little boys noticed nothing, but David felt that Andrea and Maria knew he hated Carlo and were sorry that he did so. They said nothing. They were always very kind to him, but that only made matters worse. It would have been better had they been like the two little ones who were too young to notice. David liked the two little boys, though he did not understand them and felt quite sure he had never been so small himself. But they were cute, rather like two little animals tumbling about